Sibling rivalry. Why they fight and what actually helps. A parenting guide from Creative Minds Montessori. Sibling rivalry isn't your children being bad or your parenting failing. It's normal competition for your love, made loud by small brains that can't yet use words. Under 5, the impulse control simply isn't built yet, so jealousy comes out as a shove. You can't split yourself perfectly evenly, and chasing exact fairness teaches children to keep score. What works? Name the feeling instead of forbidding it, guard a little protected one-on-one time for each child, and coach the fights rather than refereeing them. Regression after a new baby is a strategy, not a breakdown, and punishing it backfires. Most of this is a phase. A 3-year-old who had been potty trained for a year started having accidents the week the new baby came home, and asked for a bottle. A mother sat breastfeeding the infant while her toddler launched himself off the sofa, failing both at once and pinned to the couch. One family's 4-year-old genuinely adored his newborn sister, and had become oppositional with everyone else, refusing directions, clinging to his father, melting down over small things. The psychologist's reframe surprised them. It wasn't jealousy of the baby, it was about wanting attention and suddenly having to share the family's resources. Another mother's daughter met her new brother and suggested, quite calmly, that they throw the baby trash out. Notice how differently rivalry can look. There's no single face to it, which is why so many parents miss it in their quietest child. The engine is simple, and it isn't really about the sibling. The feeling of competition sits at the root of sibling rivalry, competition for a resource that just became scarce, your attention, your lap, your arms, your time. And it hits firstborns hardest for the obvious reason that they had 100% of it and are now measuring against a former monopoly. That's a real loss, not an imagined one. Which reframes the whole problem. The older child isn't objecting to the baby. They're objecting to what happened to you. A small loud newcomer took the lap, and the parent-child bond the child depends on absolutely suddenly feels contested, with no way to check whether it's still safe. Then the developmental fuel. At 4, the prefrontal cortex, impulse control, planning, emotional regulation, is years from mature. When a child that age is overwhelmed, they lack the neural wiring to pause, weigh consequences, and choose a calmer response. Under 5, they also lack the vocabulary to voice jealousy or fear safely. So it comes out through the body, because the body is the only channel currently installed. Several factors intensify it, and none are anyone's fault. Siblings less than 2 years apart tend to have more rivalry, same-sex pairs show higher conflict, sharply different temperaments create friction, and a long-term illness or special need in one child intensifies the other's sense of exclusion. And here's the part most guides skip. There are 2 layers of sibling conflict. The obvious one is externalized, fighting, mocking, arguing, tattling. The hidden one is internalized, the child who quietly feels insignificant or incapable next to a sibling, the shy one who withdraws and secretly seethes, the sibling of a chronically ill child who feels left out and then guilty for feeling it. Parents manage the loud version because it demands management. The silent one just accumulates. And worth saying plainly, parents are part of the system. Children are always watching. Aggressive parenting tends to be mirrored in sibling aggression, and hostility between the adults raises the temperature between the children. Here's a genuinely surprising piece of history. Sibling rivalry as a parenting worry is barely a century old. Parenting manuals from the 1830s fretted about sloth, boasting, precocious sexuality and carelessness, and said essentially nothing about sibling jealousy. It wasn't that children got along better. It's that nobody was watching for it. The concept crystallized in the late 1920s, when experts began treating sibling jealousy as a central issue and, importantly, reframed a child's anger at a new baby as a normal response rather than a defect to be stamped out. That reframe is the one you're still benefiting from today. Why then? Historian Peter Stearns points to structural family change. Families got smaller, parenting got warmer and more affectionate, and children were no longer assigned the care of younger siblings. Instead of bonding together against strict discipline, children began competing directly for their mother's affection. The rivalry didn't appear from nowhere. The family reorganized around a scarcer, more emotionally central prize. By the 1940s, sibling jealousy ranked as parents' third most pressing concern. Which sets up the modern irony neatly: the trend Stearns named has only intensified. Modern intensive parenting doesn't dilute the competition, it concentrates it, because fewer children compete more directly for one or two very attentive adults. And there's a newer competitor in the room that no 1920s child faced: the parent's phone. A child who has already lost the lap to a newborn is also, several times an evening, losing the parent's eyes to a screen. That doesn't create rivalry, but it does shrink the very resource the children are fighting over. Where technology genuinely helps, a baby monitor lets you give the older child genuinely undivided attention in another room, which is the thing they actually want. And shared photo streams or a quick video message let a working or non-resident parent give the displaced older child individual thinking of you contact during the day, which is precisely the currency in short supply. 3 common fixes, honestly. The first, treat them exactly the same. Buy 2 of everything, split it down the middle. It's motivated by real fairness and it does prevent a few fights. But children will always find an inequality. They are extraordinary auditors, and identical treatment ignores that children have genuinely different needs at different stages. The expert consensus is to treat fairly, not equally, tailor to each child's actual needs, and understand that treating children differently isn't favoritism. It signals that you see each of them as a distinct person. The deeper backfire is cultural. Chasing perfect equality teaches your children to keep score, and a scorekeeping habit outlasts childhood. The second, refereeing every fight. Who started it? It feels responsible and it stops the noise. But acting as judge, investigating blame and issuing verdicts, tends to intensify conflict, because it hands the children a new game, winning the trial rather than solving the problem. There's also a documented favoritism trap, since parents tend to side with the younger child, and when mothers favor the younger during conflict, siblings end up interacting less with each other. But, and this matters, total non-intervention isn't the answer either. Children are more likely to resolve conflict when parents intervene to some extent. Left entirely alone, the older or stronger sibling simply dominates and neither learns compromise. The target is narrow: mediate, don't adjudicate. The third, punishing the jealous behavior, the baby talk, the wet pants, the send him back. It feels like holding a standard, and regression is maddening when you just finished potty training. But the guidance here is unusually direct: avoid punishment for regressive behaviors. Punishing an older child for jealousy breeds resentment toward the sibling, which is the exact opposite of the goal. You've made the baby the reason they got in trouble. And suppressed feelings don't evaporate. As Adele Faber puts it, what isn't expressed outwardly goes into the subconscious, resurfacing as stomach aches, nightmares, or aggression. The legitimate exception is safety. A firm no hurting, no name-calling rule is entirely appropriate. You stop the harm. You don't punish the feeling. Averages, not prescriptions. The clash worth naming is the intervention line, the let them work it out parent versus the someone's going to get hurt parent. Here's the useful part: they're each half right, and the research says so. Over-refereeing inflames conflict. Total non-intervention lets the stronger child dominate and teaches nobody to compromise. Neither instinct is wrong, both are incomplete. So the fix isn't for one of you to win the argument. It's to agree in advance where the line sits, what counts as an ordinary squabble to let ride, and what counts as safety or cruelty that gets an adult, so the children receive one consistent rule rather than two competing ones they can shop between. There's a broad tendency for one parent to lean toward coaching and stepping back while the other leans protective, and both contribute. The coach builds skills, the protector prevents damage. The published research on gendered asymmetries here is genuinely thin and mixed, so it's not worth building a strategy on. What is well supported, and applies to every family configuration, is the modeling effect. Conflict and hostility between the adults worsens sibling relationships, because children copy how the grown-ups handle disagreement. Your children are learning conflict resolution primarily by watching you, not by being lectured about sharing. For single parents, both stances live inside one exhausted person, and the whiplash risk is internal. Permission to pick one consistent approach and hold it beats alternating between two good ones. Here's the common thread across all three methods. The feeling is allowed, the hurting isn't, and your job is less judge than translator and coach. The first method, name the feeling instead of fixing or forbidding it. A young child cannot yet turn a large feeling into words, so it becomes an action instead. Give the feeling language and it stops needing to be a hit. As Philippa Perry puts it, put the child's feelings into words so she can learn to put her feelings into words rather than into undesirable actions. And crucially, you are not required to fix the feeling. Hear it and be with it. We all prefer to be felt with rather than dealt with. So get to eye level and stay calm, because children mirror your composure. Then reflect the feeling out loud, generously. You wish you could have me all to yourself again. Faber's script goes further into the taboo. Do you sometimes wish it could go back to the way it was when you were the only one? That question is startling to ask and often produces immediate relief, because you've said the thing your child feared was unsayable. Then validate the feeling without endorsing the behavior, feelings allowed, hurting not. And practice naming emotions during calm ordinary moments. You're frustrated the tower fell, so the skill exists before you need it in a crisis. Toddlers need you to supply the whole sentence. Preschoolers can find their own words if you leave a pause. The saboteur is rushing to reassurance. But you love your sister. That's a correction wearing the costume of empathy, and it teaches the child that this particular feeling is not welcome here. The second method, if rivalry is competition for a scarce bond, make a slice of that bond uncontested. And here the fairness reframe pays off. Faber's line is the one to keep: to be loved uniquely is to be loved enough. I love you both the same invites measurement. I love you in a way I love no one else doesn't. So protect a small daily slice with the older child. It does not need to be long, because a displaced child is measuring focus, not minutes. Use the baby's nap or the other parent's watch to make it genuinely uninterrupted. Phone elsewhere, because half attention is exactly what they're already grieving. Let the older child be the oldest, real, small jobs helping with the baby, and separate playdates with younger children where they get to lead and feel large. Celebrate individuality and actively avoid family labels, the smart one, the wild one, the easy one, because a label handed to one child is a role denied to the other, and children defend their assigned territory. Name multiple strengths in each of them, out loud, often. And frame the time as a standing ritual rather than a reward, our Tuesday walk, not something earned or lost, so it can never become one more thing the baby took. For a child under 3, the ritual matters more than the content. The saboteur is canceling it for the baby. Cancel it twice and you've taught precisely the lesson you were trying to disprove. The third method, coach the conflict, mediate rather than adjudicate. A fight is a skills lab, and the goal is a pair of children who can eventually run the process without you. That means resisting the verdict, which is the hard part, since the verdict is faster and children explicitly request it. So, separate while heated and coach only once calm, because no learning happens in a flooded nervous system, in children or adults. Skip who started it, which is unanswerable and rewards the better lawyer, and ask the neutral question instead. What happened here? Then get both perspectives and validate each one out loud, in front of the other child, which is often the entire remedy. Then hand the problem back, ask them to generate a solution, so they own the method next time. Teach the micro skills offline in calm moments, how to ask to join a game, how to say no kindly, how to guess what the other person wanted, how to take a break and breathe. Then praise cooperation loudly and specifically, because reinforcing good play works considerably better than punishing fights, and most children get far more attention for conflict than for peace. Discipline privately when you must, never shaming one child in front of the other. And consider a light weekly family meeting with agreed house rules, no hitting, no name-calling. Introduce the meeting as a fun ritual with snacks before you ever use it to settle a conflict, so it isn't experienced as a tribunal. The saboteur is stepping in to deliver the fair answer when they're 2 sentences from finding one themselves. Philippa Perry offers the analogy that lands hardest, and it's worth sitting with. Imagine your spouse came home with a second spouse and told you how lucky you were to have a fellow wife, and to please get along. That is the felt reality of a new sibling. Not a gift, a rival for the love you depend on. So the hitting and pushing aren't meanness. They're displacement pain, and a bid to recover an exclusive bond that vanished without explanation. Your child used to have you entirely, and now has to share you with someone who cannot even be resented out loud, because everyone keeps saying how wonderful the baby is. Regression makes perfect logical sense from inside. The baby gets babied. The baby gets carried, fed, forgiven, cooed over. So becoming a baby is a rational strategy for recovering the attention. The bottle, the baby talk, the wet pants, the night wakings are not a collapse in development. They're a hypothesis being tested. Which is exactly why punishing them fails. You're punishing a child for the crime of correctly identifying what gets rewarded in your house. And don't miss the quiet ones. Some children sit alone feeling insignificant beside a sibling, some withdraw and seethe, some become conspicuously, exhaustingly good. Their war produces no incident to respond to, which makes it the version most likely to go unaddressed for years. What every one of them needs is smaller than it sounds, to be felt with rather than dealt with. There's a structural reason a good mixed-age program helps with rivalry specifically, and it's elegant. The multi-age classroom, typically 3-year spans, is built on the exact dynamic that diffuses it. Every child is, at some point, the smallest and the largest, the one seeking help and the one giving it. Children rotate through both roles rather than being frozen as the big one and the little one, which is precisely the trap that hardens at home. Younger children learn by watching and being inspired by older ones. Older children gain real confidence and consolidate their own learning by leading and teaching, which rebuilds the self-esteem that rivalry erodes. A good program adds trained eyes prepared to nurture all the relationships in the room, not just break up fights, and that's where the hidden version of rivalry finally becomes visible. A teacher watching all day is far more likely to notice the child who has gone quiet than a parent managing an infant at home. Where real siblings attend together, a thoughtful program supports either arrangement, working near each other, or building separate friend groups. So run the communication 3 ways. You give them the trigger and the plan. New baby 3 weeks ago, he's regressed. We're naming feelings rather than punishing. Please don't shame the accidents. They tell you what they observe day to day, and build a shared plan with you rather than delivering one to you. And the child hears the same language in both places. That single consistent message across both buildings does more than any individual technique. This is not medical advice. When in doubt, talk to your pediatrician or a child mental health professional. The reassurance first, because it's accurate. Fighting, tattling, teasing, jealousy and new baby regression are developmentally expected, and physical outbursts under 5 trace to an immature prefrontal cortex rather than a broken child. Worth a professional conversation when rivalry signs persist beyond about 6 months without easing. Safety is genuinely at risk, with real potential for injury or children you can't safely leave in a room together. Aggression arrives alongside anxiety, depression, or visible stress, where behavioral therapy genuinely helps. The hidden version shows up, a child who withdraws or feels incapable or is quietly seething, which deserves exactly as much attention as the loud kind and gets far less, or conflict is extreme and relentless, since conditions like ADHD or anxiety can intensify it considerably. Start with your pediatrician, who can refer into behavioral health. The experts here don't fully agree with each other, which is itself informative. One emphasizes naming feelings, another building skills, another protecting one-on-one time. The right mix depends on this child's temperament, the age gap, and your family's shape and values, and the disagreement among specialists is your permission to choose. Even the central advice admits it: treat fairly, not equally, is an explicit statement that there's no formula. Fairness is judgment, not arithmetic. And keep the historical perspective, because it's freeing. The very concept of sibling rivalry is barely a century old and arrived alongside one particular family model, so a lot of the shoulds you're measuring yourself against are cultural artifacts, not laws of nature. What survives across every source isn't a technique. It's a stance. Be with your child in the feeling, stay calm more often than not, hold the safety line, and keep showing up. You can do all of that imperfectly and still get it right. The fighting is loud, and it is temporary. For the full guide and more parenting resources, visit creativemindsmontessori.com/parenting.